I always met him at the door. It was just something I did. A kiss, a soft smile, that tiny act of routine that made our house feel like home. When Alex walked in, suitcase in hand, something felt off. I couldn't quite name it, but I felt it in my chest. The way he hugged me, like someone going through the motions, not someone who missed me. He muttered something about delays and back-to-back meetings. I nodded, smiled, and tucked the suspicion somewhere quiet inside me. Later, when he went to shower, I did what I always did, started unpacking for him. Shirts folded the way he liked, a wrinkled boarding pass, the scent of his cologne still clinging to the fabric. But then I saw it. My hand froze. Nestled between his clothes was a lace bra, burgundy, delicate, definitely not mine. Not my size, not my style. My heart didn't break. It slowed, like my body was trying to process what my brain already knew. And I didn't cry. I didn't yell. That part of me had been fading for months, with every late night, every vague excuse, every empty look across the dinner table. No, I just sat there with it in my hand, quiet. And then, I smiled. Not out of madness, but out of clarity. I folded it neatly, just like everything else, and placed it exactly where I found it. I didn't say a word. Not yet. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always hit like a slap. Sometimes it seeps in slow, like fog rolling over everything you thought was solid. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, listening to the water running in the shower. Same sound as always, but suddenly it felt louder, more distant. My eyes wandered around the room, our room, filled with pictures and memories that suddenly felt staged. I wasn't heartbroken, I was awake, like I'd finally stopped lying to myself. I thought about the week he'd been gone, the text replies that took hours, the tired voice on the phone that didn't sound like him. Or maybe it did, and I'd just been too hopeful to hear the shift. I thought about how I'd defended him to friends. He's just stressed, I'd say. Work's been crazy. But now I could see it all for what it really was. Cover stories. Lazy ones at that. I had excused so much. Too much. And for what? The oddest part? I didn't feel rage. Not the kind that demands screaming or smashing a glass. I felt composed. Almost surgical in how clear everything became. I knew better than to confront him in that moment. No drama, no tears, just strategy. I stood up, smoothed the bed, and looked in the mirror. My face was calm. Too calm. That's when I realized he had no idea what he'd just started. When he stepped out of the shower, towel around his waist, smiling like nothing in the world had changed, I greeted him with the same warmth I always did. I asked if he was hungry. He said he wasn't. I laughed softly, nodded, and leaned in to kiss his cheek. I wonder now if he noticed how long I looked at him before I did. Just a second too long. Just enough to let the silence stretch between us like a thread he didn't know was fraying. That night, as he drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay still with my eyes open. I listened to his breathing, steady, shallow, unaware. I thought of all the nights I had stayed up worrying about him, loving him, praying for us. And now I was here, awake for a different reason entirely. I wasn't mourning the marriage. I was studying it, dissecting it, trying to understand when it had stopped being ours and started being his performance. I stared at the ceiling and made a silent vow. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't crumble. I'd let him keep believing I was clueless, content, still wrapped around his finger. Let him think he'd gotten away with it. Because if he thought this was over, oh no. This was just the part where I turned the page and started writing my own ending. The next morning, I brewed his coffee just the way he liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. I placed it on the table beside his phone and kissed his head like nothing had changed. He thanked me without looking up, scrolling, tapping, locked into his little screen world. I sat across from him, watching the man who thought he'd fooled me. Every word he spoke, every sigh he gave. I studied him. Not with love, with precision. It was like watching a play I'd already seen, only this time I knew the ending. He launched into one of his usual debriefs, meetings that ran long, clients who crossed boundaries, dinners that were purely professional. I nodded. I even chuckled when he threw in an office joke. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I was the picture of trust. But inside, I was rewinding the last month in my head. Every missed call, every change in his tone, every little shift I'd brushed aside. I wasn't crazy. I was conditioned. That night I started digging, quietly, deliberately. I opened the laptop while he snored beside me and logged into the shared bank account. There were hotel charges that didn't match his itinerary, dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together. I took screenshots, saved receipts. I wasn't chasing the truth anymore. I was collecting it. And the best part? He still kissed me goodnight like I was the fool. Poor man had no idea I'd already started building his exit. Each day became a performance, and I was flawless. I laughed at the right moments, touched his arm when he spoke, kept up the illusion that nothing had shifted. But behind every smile was a sharpened edge. I was watching his patterns, tracking his stories, and noting every detail that didn't add up. I became a mirror, reflecting whatever he needed to see. Meanwhile, I was learning who he really was when he thought I wasn't looking. I started checking his phone when he showered. He never changed his passcode. Arrogance will do that to a man. I found messages that didn't need decoding. A woman named Mel, heart emojis, room numbers. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself, quietly labeling the subject lines by date and location. I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. There's something powerful about staying quiet when someone expects you to explode. By the end of that week, I had a folder on my desktop called Smile. It held bank statements, call logs, screenshots, even photos I took of the receipts in his coat pocket. He kissed me one night and asked if I was okay, said I seemed distant. I just smiled and told him I was tired. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "You always take care of me." And I thought, not for long. I started journaling at night, not the kind filled with feelings, but facts, times, dates, names. It was methodical, clinical. I documented everything, like I was preparing a case file, not a diary. I'd sit there, pen in hand, with him just feet away in bed, clueless. And in those pages, I felt powerful. Not because I had caught him, but because I was building something that he wouldn't see coming until it was far too late to undo. I even practiced my reactions in the mirror. What I'd say, how I'd smile. Not the broken woman begging for the truth. No, that part of me had been buried. What stared back was someone sharper, calmer, more dangerous. I wasn't chasing justice. I was writing the script. And every night, as he snored peacefully beside me, I whispered to myself, play dumb, play sweet, but never play small again. By the time he booked another business trip, I didn't flinch. I kissed him goodbye with a promise to miss him so much and waved from the doorway. As his car disappeared down the street, I turned around and locked the door behind me. Then I opened my laptop, poured a glass of wine, and clicked on the folder labeled Smile. If he wanted to play games, I'd make sure he didn't win. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Not in a panic, not with tears in my throat, but with a tone so calm it surprised even me. I sat in the parking lot outside the grocery store, listening as she explained my rights. What I could claim, what I could prove, what would hold up in court. I took notes, asked sharp questions, and thanked her like I was ordering coffee. If he wanted to play with fire, I'd be the one holding the matchbox. That same day, I looked deeper into his company, their code of conduct, travel reimbursement policies, expectations for employee behavior on trips. Turns out, they're strict, very strict. And Alex, well, he was sloppy. Romantic dinners, luxury hotels, flights upgraded without approval, all on the company's dime. I didn't even have to stretch the truth, just highlight it. I was starting to realize the best revenge didn't require destruction, just exposure. I created a new folder on my computer and titled it Truth. It felt cleaner than revenge, more accurate. Inside it, I placed everything: photos of receipts, screenshots of his flirty texts, hotel records, call logs, and yes, the bra. I took a picture of it with the packing slip still attached. I wanted whoever saw it to know I hadn't planted a thing. It was all him, every lie, every carelessly hidden breadcrumb. I just happened to be the one who followed the trail. I didn't rush. That was key. There was no timeline, no big dramatic deadline. I wanted every detail to be airtight. Every file, every email, every timestamp aligned like dominoes. He thought he was clever, covering his tracks with vague words and half-truths. But the thing about patterns is, they reveal themselves to anyone patient enough to look. And I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was focused, sharpened, cold, but not cruel. Every evening, I added more to the folder. I recorded voice memos on my phone, his stories, his lies, even the way he said, "I love you," with no conviction. It was all theater, and I was studying the script. One night, I caught him on the phone with her. He was in the garage, probably thinking the walls protected him. They didn't. I stood in the hallway, recording every word through the door, and I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just hit save. The next day, I met with a second lawyer, just to compare notes. She called me well-prepared, said most women came in devastated. I smiled and told her I already did that part. What I needed now was direction, not sympathy. Because while he was busy planning his next escape, I was making sure mine left footprints, ones that led directly to his downfall. At night, I'd lay next to him and wonder how many times he'd laughed behind my back, how many lies he'd whispered with the same mouth that once made promises under a wedding arch. But I didn't let bitterness take root. That would have given him too much power. What I felt was cooler, quieter, like standing in the eye of a storm. I wasn't seeking to hurt him. I was seeking the truth to speak louder than I ever could. I started printing everything. Hard copies, labeled and sorted, each in its own plastic sleeve. I bought a binder, not just any binder, a sleek black one with silver rings and a lock tab. It felt like I was building something sacred. Proof of who he really was. Not just for me, but for anyone who might one day doubt it. I added a short note on the first page. This is not revenge. This is accountability. Then came the final detail, the one that sealed it all. I printed out the company's ethics policy and highlighted every section he'd violated. Travel misuse, conduct unbecoming, undisclosed relationships. It was all there. I slid it into the folder behind the lingerie photo, zipped it shut, and placed it gently in the back of the closet, right next to the suitcase he always used for business trips. I wasn't planning a breakup. I was planning an exposure. I told him I wanted to throw him a birthday dinner. Just something small, just family and close friends. He looked surprised, maybe even a little guilty. But he smiled and said yes, like a man who thought the storm had passed. I booked the caterer, arranged flowers, sent out the invites, and then I added one name he didn't expect, his boss. I smiled when I pressed send. After all, what's a celebration without a little surprise? The day of the party, the house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. Candles flickered on polished wood. I wore the dress he once said made me look dangerous, and this time, I didn't tone it down. As guests arrived, I greeted each one with warmth and practiced charm. I played the role he always wanted me to play, the perfect wife, hostess, cheerleader, shadow. But tonight, I wasn't any of those things. I was the director. He walked in an hour later, all charm and swagger, holding a bottle of wine and flashing that everything's fine smile. He kissed my cheek, whispered something flirty, and I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. Because I already knew, he was about to open a gift no one in that room would forget. And for once, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Dinner flowed easily, people laughed, wine poured. I watched him work the room, shaking hands, telling stories, the charming version of himself that used to dazzle me. But now all I saw was the performance. I kept my smile steady, eyes scanning the table, noting who was there and what they meant to him. His coworkers, his boss, even a few people from our neighborhood. All people who believed the version of us he had carefully curated. When the time came for cake, I stood up and clinked my glass. The room quieted. He looked over, smiling like he expected a toast, and I gave him one. I thanked him for his hard work, his ambition, the years we'd shared. I said how proud I once was to call him mine. I could feel his confusion growing with each word, like a thread unraveling from a too tight seam. He didn't see it coming, not yet. That made every second sweeter. Then I handed him the box, wrapped in matte silver paper, tied with a navy ribbon. He blinked, caught off guard, then chuckled like a man who thought it might be a watch or a framed photo. I told him to open it in front of everyone, said it with a playful wink. He hesitated, just for a second, and then he untied the ribbon and lifted the lid, not realizing he was about to lose more than his appetite. He froze. Right there at the head of the table, surrounded by people who thought they knew him, he just stopped. Inside the box was the binder, the one labeled Truth. On top, a letter addressed to him in my handwriting. I watched his eyes scan the first lines, then dart up to mine. The color drained from his face. The laughter around the table faded like a radio being slowly turned down. Everyone felt the shift. No one said a word. I could see his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through the pages. The receipts, the screenshots, the photo of the bra with the timestamp. And then, the final sheet. The company policy, highlighted and annotated. The letter ended with a PS. I've already moved out, enjoy the promotion. Oh wait, you might not. It was short, direct, impossible to misinterpret. I wasn't making a scene. I was presenting a truth, dressed in ribbon and precision. The room didn't erupt. It collapsed. Silence filled every corner, thicker than smoke. His boss stood up slowly. A friend dropped his fork. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I walked over to the bar, poured myself a drink, and raised my glass to no one in particular. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. The fallout came fast. Within a week, Alex was called in for a formal review. His company investigated everything, every receipt, every flight, every late-night expense he had so confidently billed to them. And just like that, the man who thought he had it all under control was escorted out with a cardboard box. The woman he'd risked everything for? She vanished the moment things got real. No loyalty, no goodbye, just silence. The same kind he used to give me at the dinner table. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online or tell mutual friends what I'd done. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity. Truth. Justice, if you want to call it that. I packed up what I wanted from our house and left the rest without a second glance. No drama, no second chances. Just keys on the counter and a note that simply read, "Don't call me." I found a small apartment near the coast. Nothing fancy, but it had sunlight and quiet, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. I bought new sheets. I rearranged my books. I cooked dinner for one and didn't feel lonely. I felt light, like I had stepped out of a costume I didn't realize I'd been wearing. I wasn't just alone. I was whole, and that was something he could never take credit for, or destroy. I started walking every morning just to feel the ground under my feet again. There was something healing about the rhythm of it, the steady pace, the open sky, the way the ocean air curled into my lungs. I'd pass cafes, hear strangers laugh, and for once I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was. Not perfect, not untouched, but okay. In a real, grounded, unshakable way. Sometimes I'd sit on a bench with my coffee and think about the version of me from a year ago. The one who apologized too much, who shrank to keep peace, who doubted her own instincts just to hold on to a man who let go of her long before she ever knew it. That woman loved deeply, and I honor her for it. But she's not here anymore. In her place stands someone who still loves, still hopes, but never again at the cost of herself. One afternoon, I booked a trip, the same destination Alex once claimed he had to visit for business. I laughed when I clicked confirm. It felt symbolic, like reclaiming a stolen memory. This time, it would be my suitcase, my ticket, my story. No lies, no shadows, just me and a carry-on filled with peace, sunscreen, and something I hadn't felt in ages, excitement for what comes next. The hotel was even more beautiful than the photos, right by the water, with linen curtains that danced in the breeze and the smell of salt always in the air. I unpacked slowly, savoring the silence, the space, the fact that I didn't owe anyone an explanation for where I was or why. I ordered dinner on the balcony and watched the sun melt into the sea. It was the kind of evening that once would have made me ache with loneliness. Now it felt like a homecoming. I didn't check his social media. I didn't ask anyone what he was doing. Whatever storm he was facing, it was no longer mine to weather. My story had moved on. I read books, slept in, swam at sunrise. I wrote down thoughts I hadn't made room for in years. I even laughed, really laughed, at a joke from a stranger by the pool. And for a moment, I saw myself the way I used to be before all the shrinking and doubting. Whole, bright, unapologetic. As I stood barefoot in the sand on my last night, waves brushing against my ankles, I whispered a small thank you, not to him, but to the part of me that stayed alive through it all. The part that waited patiently for the day I'd stop surviving and start living again. This trip wasn't revenge, it was recovery. And the view? It wasn't just beautiful. It was mine.